What's going on, bottom line viewers? It's been a while since I've been live like this, but today I decided because it's August, the NFL season is right around the corner, and I want to see and I want to try and experiment here. So today, I'm going to rant about a topic that I just thought of because the Indianapolis Colts are absolutely positively falling apart in front of our faces. So that means that the AFC South is basically, for most people, a one-team race. And that is the Tennessee Titans, because I don't know if anybody in their right mind considers the Houston Texans as an actual NFL team. So today, I'm going to give you my reasoning for why Jacksonville, yes, Jacksonville, the Jags, could actually win this division and give the Titans a tough time to win the South. Because I feel like now, and in my personal opinion, I don't see the Colts being competitive this year. They do not have an NFL starting caliber quarterback on their roster, it seems, until Carson Wentz is able to come back. And I don't know when that is, especially considering Carson Wentz's injury history. They've also just lost their best player, Quentin Nelson, to the same length of time. So their best part of their team, their offensive line, has completely been torn apart. So I'm going to give you the reasons why I believe Jacksonville, yes, Jacksonville, guys, and I'm not even kidding about this, can maybe, just maybe, possibly, it could happen, they could win the AFC South. So before I get into that, make sure that you do spike that like button. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and also check the link in the description for my Patreon, where right now I just put out the first fantasy football video of the fantasy season. So check that out on Patreon if you want exclusive fantasy content not found on YouTube. All right, so let's dive into this and let's talk about it. So what's going on, guys? Let me know how you feel about this. I think this very well could happen, honestly. That is Jacksonville winning this division. So, starting off with this, all right? The Colts, this is a two-team race. So that means that it could be Jacksonville, it could be the Titans. I am eliminating the Colts from this conversation. I do not see them as being a legitimate contender to actually win this division. Now, maybe they'll have enough at the end of the year. Maybe. This would be the absolute best outcome, in my opinion, for the Colts. And I don't think I'm overreacting for them to somehow make a wild card with 9 wins, right? Maybe, okay? If they can get Carson Wentz back, they're healthy, all that sort of stuff. But even with Carson Wentz, I was already questioning them as a playoff team anyways. So it's a two-team race. Maybe it's the Titans, maybe it's Jacksonville. Obviously, the favorite here are the Titans. So the first reason, the roster for the Jacksonville Jags, a complete wild card. Complete wild card. We do not know what to expect from this roster. And what do I mean by that? There are so many players on this team that have yet to define what they are in the NFL. They've yet to define their ceiling. They've yet to define their floor. We do not know what these players are in the NFL. And a lot of them are young, and a lot of them could break out this year, right? So to me, if things go right for this team, we're talking about a team with maybe a breakout quarterback, maybe a breakout running back, maybe a breakout receiver, maybe a couple breakout defenders. And if those things go right, very well this team could be an Indianapolis Colts from 2012 with Andrew Luck, right? This has happened before in the AFC South, a division with no clear defined favorite, because at least Vegas, I know I've said I'm personally pretty high on the Titans, and I know a lot of BLVers are, but personally, when you look at Vegas, they aren't super high on the Titans. So when there's no clear favorite in a division, it makes way for a potential upset to make their way to the playoffs. So first things first is it's a wild card. A lot of wild card players that could define to be pretty good players. We'll get into that a little bit later on. This coaching staff is a complete wild card as well. That's what makes Jacksonville so interesting, because Urban Meyer, we don't know what to expect from him in the NFL. It could be fantastic. It could be awful. We don't know. But so far, throughout his career as a coach, he's been successful everywhere he's been. He's been able to build a team and compete quickly. Darrell Bevell is a solid offensive coordinator. I wouldn't call him great. I wouldn't call him bad. I think he's somewhere in the middle. He's solid. He's had some success with, Matthew Stafford in Detroit and in Seattle. He's been on winning teams before. Joe Cullen on the defensive side of the football, I think, is an underrated name to pay attention to. On the defensive side, scheming things up. Coming from Baltimore, I like the way that Baltimore typically plays defense. I think he will implement that kind of scheme in Jacksonville, and they have the players to execute it. But let's start off with the offense, right? So Urban Meyer is going to be bringing a little bit of a sprinkle of his college offense to really the NFL foundation of what Darrell Bevell is going to give them. So Trevor Lawrence, for them to win this division, their path to win the AFC South is that he needs to be as advertised. He can't be worse than as advertised. He has to step in from day one and become a at least top 20 quarterback. If they're going to win this division, he needs to at least be a top 20, and I'm sure that some people would argue a top 15. Well, if we look back at last year, right? We had two quarterbacks that I felt played at a pretty high level. We had Justin Herbert. Justin Herbert played as a top 10-ish quarterback in the league, and Joe Burrow played as a top 15-ish quarterback when he played. So we had two quarterbacks with high draft status who were not billed to be Trevor Lawrence play at that level. So it is possible that Trevor Lawrence, even though I had Zach Wilson as my guy, it is possible, considering his draft stock, considering the hype surrounding him, that he enters the NFL and is Andrew Luck-ish from day one and carries a team to 10 plus wins. Very well could happen, but he needs to if they're going to win the division. Secondly, I think they need to have a balanced attack, and I think they can pull that off, right? There's a difference between having it potentially and also being able to do it. I think they can do it. They have, James Robinson, of course, who was in 1,000-yard back last year, entering his second season as more of a power element to their run game. You have Travis Etienne in the first round, who I was high on. He was my personal number one back in the draft. I love his ability to break open big plays. He's a good receiver as well. So he's going to complement, I think, Robinson, and they're going to have, I think, a little bit of a timeshare there, 50-50 sort of thing. And then you can sprinkle in a little bit of Carlos Hyde every once in a while as the third stringer. But overall, they have a good plethora of running backs. But on top of that, they actually have a powerful offensive line, especially in the interior, where they've proven they can run the ball even when they suck, right? This team has always been able to run the ball. Since 2017, when they went to the AFC Championship game with Leonard Fournette, that was the strength of their offense. Last year, they were the worst team in the league, but they were still able to have an 1,000-yard back because their offensive line is good at run blocking and they can open up holes. So they can dictate pace of play on that offensive line. If they get a little bit better tackle play, and I think Trevor Lawrence's ability to buy time and maneuver will help their pass protection a little bit, but they definitely need to get better in that area to help out young Trevor Lawrence. So if you have a balanced run attack with Trevor Lawrence's arm, you then implement, okay, what do we have for weapons on the outside? Well, we have DJ Chark, who can stretch the field, and if he can break out as a number one receiver, which we've been waiting for, we thought it would be last year, it could very well be this year as a number one alpha target in this offense. Laviska Shenault could be a really good slot receiver, and he's had really raving reviews out of camp as well. So you combine a Marvin Jones and a DJ Chark on the perimeter who can stretch the field and make plays in the intermediate to deep level, with two playmakers on the underneath game with Shenault and also with Travis Etienne, who can make plays underneath after the catch and provide easy yards for Trevor Lawrence. Not to mention, Trevor Lawrence also adds a dimension as a runner that you can get easy yards, and you can also execute on fourth down, and you can execute in the red zone. It makes it a lot easier to do so at the very least. So you have an offense with the potential to be top half in the league, right? You have an offense that could be good. If the pieces come together and Lawrence plays well, I would not be surprised if this, at the very least, was a top 20 offense. Would I say I would rank it as that right now? No, but does it have the potential to do that? Absolutely it does. But again, they do need a breakout number one wide receiver, and it could be DJ Chark. Now, defensively, I think this is the key to everything. Honestly, the offense could be good, and they could still struggle to stop teams. But defensively, when you look at them, they have a totally new defensive scheme, which I think is a good thing. I think they needed to switch that up. And they have plenty of young players that could surprise a lot of people, specifically in the secondary, right? Because when you look at Joe Cullen, right, who comes from Baltimore, again, I'll say it again, he comes from Baltimore. So what is good in Baltimore, right, on defense? The secondary. So what does Jacksonville need to do defensively? What do they need to have defensively to be a good defense this year? They need to have corners, and they need to have safeties that can play. When you look at their depth chart, they have a lot of young talent at both positions, and if they have one or two breakouts at either position, they could set themselves up to be a surprisingly good defense. Now, you look at their cornerbacks, they signed Shaquille Griffin, who's now switching schemes, but he's proven to be a good starting NFL corner. They signed him to bigger money than I thought he would be signed to, but nonetheless, he's a proven corner. CJ Henderson is the guy. CJ Henderson has to be the breakout player. He has to. Last year, he was a top 10 pick. He was pretty good. He was at least better than Okudah, in my opinion. He was on a really bad defense with a really bad team, but I thought that he played well when he played. The problem was injuries. So in his second year, can he take that jump in a man-to-man primarily scheme? And he's going to be important. He needs to be that guy. They also drafted Tyson Campbell, who I was high on as a man-to-man corner. I think he fits the system well. He could potentially play in the nickel position. And then you have Trey Herndon as well, who's not a bad player. Sidney Jones is part of their depth. But overall, the corners have lots of potential because you have lots of young players. Specifically, two players that I was high on in CJ Henderson and Tyson Campbell, who you drafted in, I think, the first 2 rounds of the draft in the last 2 years. Safety-wise, you signed Rayshon Jenkins, who I like. Andre Sisco, I was high on in the 3rd round, who I think could be pretty good as a free safety. Andrew Wingard is decent. Josh Jones and Gerard Wilson. Gerard Wilson, PFF ranked as their highest, I believe, safety last year. Maybe that was Wingard, but regardless, they have about 4 guys that could play starting caliber roles for them, so they have some depth, but they need one of those guys to shine. It could be Jenkins, it could be Sisco as a rookie, but one of those guys needs to step up. Overall, though, my point is for this defense, their secondary needs to perform for this defense to perform. Maybe they're a year away, but I wouldn't call it illogical or impossible for that to happen because they certainly have high-profile talent in the draft and guys that can stand out. So definitely look out for the secondary. Early in the year, you'll be able to tell whether this defense will be good or not based on their performance. Now, when you look at the front seven, one of the big issues for them, obviously, they lost Josh Allen last year. He'll be back. That's big. Kayvon Chason needs to deliver this year. Apparently, he's been better in camp, as from what I've read. But that duo needs to perform for them. And I feel like in a different system here where it's more schemed up pressure, they're going to blitz more. They'll be more aggressive. It's not just a 4-man rush. I actually think Josh Allen was always made to play in that system. I think he'll be a better player there. And Kayvon Chason played in that kind of system in LSU. So I think that will be good for him. Dwayne Smoot's also a pretty solid player. But a big thing for them last year was they could not stop the run. What they did here in the offseason was they added players who can stop the run. We're talking about Roy Robertson Harris, who's been a very underrated player from Chicago. Malcolm Brown, if you're a Patriots fan, you know, or a Saints fan, Malcolm Brown. Ward from Baltimore, and Gotsitz, I believe is how you say his name, from Denver. So those players are all pretty much run defenders, and they'll be probably an improvement. They added all those players. Those aren't guys that they already had on their team. You know, they still have like Taven Bryan and stuff. I don't know when he'll ever play well, but they still have those guys, and they added all 4 of those players. So they should, at least on paper, be a better run defense. They also added Damian Wilson to the linebacking core from the Chiefs. So they have good depth overall at all positions. They don't have a ton of studs. So that's really what I'm saying, is they need studs to break out. They need Josh Allen to break out. They need Chase On to break out. They have Miles Jack, who's already awesome. And they have, Joe Schobert, who probably will only play better this year. But if those secondary guys, if they can just have 1 or 2 more studs on defense, that will go a long way to improving their overall defense. Plus, I think the scheme inherently will improve them. So overall, when you look at the roster and you look at the talent and you compare it to Tennessee, like Tennessee's roster is obviously better with the higher echelon names, but I think it wouldn't be a stretch to say that the Jacksonville Jags have more depth to their team. And I don't think it would be impossible to suggest that Jacksonville overall, if Trevor Lawrence could play at a level of Ryan Tannehill, I don't think that would be all that shocking. It would take quite a bit because Ryan Tannehill is a lower end, top 10, top 12 quarterback. But we're talking about a generational pick here in Trevor Lawrence. So it could certainly happen. Receiver-wise, the Titans obviously have Julio and A.J. Brown. We're already hearing about Julio being a little bit banged up in camp. And if they lose him at any point in the season, they're a drastically different, worse team because we know they don't have a lot of depth there. Obviously, King Henry is King Henry. They'll run the ball on everybody, but their offense will be good, but they lost Arthur Smith. So that opens the door for maybe their scheme is the difference between them having a top 5 offense last year and maybe, a lesser offense this year. And we know their defense didn't play well last year. So even though it's improved, hasn't improved enough. So I think there are certainly questions with the Titans that you could pick and you could nitpick and say, if this thing goes wrong for them, if Caleb Farley isn't healthy, who's their number 1 corner? Who's playing corner for them? Is Bud Dupree going to work out for them, or is he going to kind of go back to his play a couple years ago? So, there's things that you could say with the Titans for sure where you could nitpick. But I think it's more about Jacksonville overall just breaking out as a team. You look at the schedule. I think it's a little bit easier than the Titans, especially when you look at the beginning of the season. If you look at the beginning of the season, if they can sweep the Texans, I think that's honestly the key to setting themselves up. So if they can get 2 wins versus the Texans are the worst team in the NFL. They start week 1 off versus the Texans. So that's big. If they can get a win in week 1, I think that's significant. Week 2, they play at home versus Denver. They can win that game, right? They can win that game. The Cardinals at home in week number 3. I think they can win that game. I mean, the Cardinals are technically the better team, I think, for most people. But, Denver doesn't really you have the quarterback advantage in the first 2 games. And then the Cardinals, especially because both these games are at home, the Cardinals are a team that I think could beat anybody but also lose to anybody as well. And then the Bengals, you play the Bengals. So in the first 4 weeks of the season, where Trevor Lawrence is just getting used to the NFL, you play the Texans, who suck, the Broncos, who are not a playoff team, the Cardinals, who are, I think, overrated, beatable, but, probably your toughest test, and then the Bengals, who don't have a good defense. And Joe Burrow versus Trevor Lawrence, that will be fun to watch. But that's a winnable game. That one's on the road. Now, what's unfortunate about their schedule is they do not play Indianapolis until later in the year, which does kind of suck. You would want it, if Jacksonville was to win this division, you would want them to play Indy early in the year. But that wasn't the case. So that does suck. But if they could just split with Indianapolis, I think that's fine. So if they could get, let's say they beat the Texans twice. They beat Denver and they beat the Bengals. That's already 4 wins. Okay? Say they lose to the Cardinals. They're 4-1. They play Atlanta at home, which is a winnable game. They play the Jets in week 16, which is a winnable game. And if they split with the Colts and Titans, what's that, 8-9 wins I'm already talking about right there? So they play tough games versus Buffalo, at Seattle after their bye week, San Francisco at home, which is going to be tough for San Fran because they have to travel across the country, the Rams, and the Patriots. So those games are games I expect them to lose. So that's 5 or 6 games. So, if you're looking at all those other games, that's already 11. So let's say they lose one to the Colts, they lose one to the Titans. That's 9 or 10 wins. I think it's possible for the Jags to win this division if they can somehow get to 10 wins, which I don't think is crazy considering this division is not good and considering they do play some bad teams on their schedule. So, overall, I don't think this is absolutely nuts, especially if we get some of the breakouts that I suggested, especially on defense and probably on offense, to be honest. We're bound to have breakouts on this team on offense. It's just going to happen, right? On the other hand, the Titans have a tougher schedule, especially the way it's constructed. So they play the Cards and the Seahawks in the first 2 weeks, which I think is much tougher than the Texans and the Broncos. So if the Jags could just grab the lead early, that would be big for them. Now, the Titans also later in the year play the Bills, the Chiefs, the Colts, the Rams in a row, right? Bills and Chiefs are 2 games at home that they could lose both of, which would suck for them. And they also play the Rams on the road. The Colts, I'm not sure again because I don't know who their quarterback will be. But that's tough, and that's in Indianapolis. They play the Chiefs instead of the Broncos, for instance, right? They play the Steelers instead of the Bengals, which I think is a tougher matchup for the Titans. They play the Saints instead of the Falcons, which I think is also a tougher matchup for the Titans. So overall, I think Jacksonville has a chance here. I think they're like the sleeper team that nobody's talking about that could win their division. When we look at every division in the NFL, when we look at the East, most people are saying the Bills, some people are saying the Patriots, and a very, very low amount of people are saying the Dolphins, right? Everybody kind of knows that, though. Nobody is suggesting the Jets. The AFC North, everybody's saying the Browns or the Ravens, and I don't think anybody is suggesting the Steelers would win the division. The AFC South, now that the Colts are out of the picture, I think this sparks the conversation of Jacksonville and obviously the AFC West, the Kansas City Chiefs in the AFC. So if Jacksonville, even if they don't win their division, let's say, I think just the fact that they're in this division with the Colts and the Texans now, with the Colts being in injury madness and the Texans being the worst team in the league, they could find a way to get into the wild card as a 9 or 10 win team. That could certainly happen. Even if Tennessee is still an 11 or 12 win team, this could still happen. So overall, I wanted to give you this argument and see what you think. So I'm going to open it up for a few comments right now and see what you guys think overall. But I did want to lay this out because it sparked in my mind earlier, and I was like, you know what? I bet on Jacksonville as a long shot to win this division very early in the offseason as a part of a parlay, and now I kind of feel like it might actually realistically happen. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Let's check this out. All right, let's look at these comments. If you haven't already, make sure you do. Gronk, spike that like button. Some Punk says $5. Thank you, Some Punk, who's also, I believe, a Russo brander over there. Says, Mitch is awesome. Great addition to the brand. Nothing but big things in your future. Appreciate that, man. Appreciate the $5, by the way. Benjamin says, bring back Blake Bortles. No, please no. Steelers Nation says, Steelers overrated according to Mitch. Yes, they are. Steeler Nation says Wilson is better than Lawrence. Jeremy says I'm capping. Dried Ocean says the Jags are underrated. Isaac says the Colts have forfeited. Bennett says, hey, Mitch, what's going on? Coach says the Titans are strong. Ultra says the Titans are legitimately better everywhere offensively. I mean, yes, right now, but I think at the end of the year we could be saying Jacksonville. I don't think it's crazy. DJ Chark has talent. Travis Etienne has talent. Look at their roster. I mean, Laviska Shenault, everybody freaking loves that guy. So I feel like Jacksonville could very well have a good offense this year. It might not be as good as Tennessee, but honestly, Jacksonville, if their defense was better than Tennessee, would this be surprising at all? Would that be surprising? Aqua says your list is almost done. Are you talking about the top 50? Brian says I'd switch Denver and Arizona due to the strength of Denver's defense and it only being Trevor's second start, but your point still stands. I think Arizona is a tougher game than Denver, but that's just my opinion. What's going on, guys? Brian says Urban is a proven culture builder. The Jags have plenty of offensive playmakers, improve the offensive line in the second round. That's also true. And the defense has a lot of young playmakers that are still developing. They are not my favorite to win, but they could go, you're saying they can go 9-8? Yeah, that could happen. I think a lot of it too, like Urban Meyer, like, will he be a good coach? Like, if he is, then we're talking, right? Because we don't really know, right? Will Curtis Weaver play good this season? I don't know. Rob says, I'm hitting the over in every Titans game. They should have a better defense, though. They should have a better defense. Like, I'm not trying to hate on the Titans by making this video. I'm just trying to give an alternative argument. I hope you guys understand that. Like, this doesn't necessarily change my prediction for the division, which the prediction for the division is that the Titans win the division. But I'm just giving you an alternative view of what could happen in this division that could see the Titans fall and could see the Jags rise to the occasion and take the division. Like, it could happen. It could happen. We've seen it before in the AFC South in the last decade. Brian says, fair enough. I just think that Denver's defense is going to be nasty. I do, but I think any team that can barely score over 20 points is very beatable. Connor says, why do you have that Bills jersey? Because I like Josh Allen. Is that okay, Connor? I hope you understand. But also, I cover the entire NFL, so I have lots of jerseys. Like, I'll tilt my camera for a sec. See that? I have lots of jerseys, bro. Lots of jerseys. All right. So I think I'll end it right there. Wanted to go short and sweet. Depending on the response of this video, I will do more of these live rant type videos. Let me know if you enjoyed this one, and I'll set up some more NFL topics moving forward for this upcoming season. So thanks for watching, guys. Make sure you do Gronk Spike that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It's Mitch. Thanks for watching. Peace.